Hello, this is Aral from VALOI. Today we're going to talk a bit about stitching. So stitching or putting several images together to create a larger image file is something that a lot of people do for camera scanning. Because we have this kind of constrained sensor size, sometimes when you have strange formats like this, 6x6 or panoramic pictures, sometimes you have to crop in. If you just take one picture, if we took one picture of this, we end up and we crop to the proper 6x6 frame, we lose a lot of the pixels that the sensor generates because there's just no image there, so we don't want it. So we're going to go through the steps. I'm going to show you what I would do with the camera physically, just how I do the stitching itself, some settings on the camera. And then I'm going to take them into Lightroom on the computer, and I'll show you one of the ways that you can do this. So just keep in mind that I'm going to use Lightroom today. A lot of people use other software. There's Photoshop does it really well. There's also more dedicated panoramic stitching software that can do this. But Lightroom is really the most straightforward tool. So if you're able to do it in Lightroom, it's usually easiest. Other tools might be more powerful, but Lightroom is certainly the most easy to do. I'm also going to show you doing what I want to call batch stitching. So this could be useful for just doing one image in high quality, but sometimes for example, when I shoot panoramic pictures on 35mm film, I'll stitch two 35mm frames together. So I'll use the standard holder and then stitch them together, take 2 shots per frame and stitch them, and then it's really nice to be able to do the whole roll at once. And Lightroom has this nice batch functionality that's really easy to use with the grouping tools. So let's start with the physical setup. This is a very typical kind of 360 setup: copy stand, camera. This happens to sit on a lens collar, so we're going to use that. I'll get back to that. And then this is basically the enthusiast kit that you get from us. It doesn't really matter which kind of holder setup you have, as long as you have a good holder like the VALOI holders. So let's start with the settings on the camera. This is usually where I like to start, just get everything right from the start. We're of course shooting in RAW. We have all of those nice settings done ahead of time. I have a little grid to help me do the framing, and I've preset the aperture to the aperture that's good. On this lens, this is this Sigma 70mm. The aperture is set to 7.1. That's the one I found to be best. Image stabilization is off, of course, and that's that sort of thing. So here we are in the manual mode. I happen to have done a bunch of presets on my camera, so it jumps straight to a lot of very useful settings. But I'm going to do manual mode and just turn it to around 60th of a second. I'm not quite sure where we're going to end up, but I'll go through that too. Then I'm going to turn on the light. So this is the typical configuration that you would scan the film in. You've got the camera kind of this way and the film going this way. When we stitch, typically so you can do two pictures or 4 pictures, or I've done stitches up to 16 pictures. It gets kind of ridiculous. It's not necessarily giving you all that much extra. I'm going to show you 2 pictures, but just keep in mind that you can do this with more if you really needed to. When you do 2 pictures, what's really nice is you can align the long side of the sensor with the shortest side of the film. So let's pretend you're doing 35mm. The sensor has the same shape of the film, but you can take the long side of the sensor and align it with the short side of the film. On 6x6, well, they're the same, it's a square. So what we do here, because we want to move film through, the film through the holder, we're taking advantage of the fact that the VALOI holders allows you to push film through them. On other systems, you might have to kind of move the setup around. I don't like that. It messes with leveling typically, so I'm going to avoid it. What you might do on this sort of setup is move the holder. Some people have issues with that, but it should be fine in this case. I'm not a great fan of this because you get the film kind of sticking into the copy stand. It's a slightly awkward setup, especially on video. Perfectly fine at home if you just want to do a few frames. But if you want to do a lot of this sort of stitching, I really recommend getting a lens collar. So you want to see it super clearly from the front, but we'll throw in some B-roll and you can see it from the back. Basically, the camera is not attached directly to the copy stand. There's a collar sitting around, clamping in the lens, and then that is attached to the copy stand. And what's really nice about lens collars is that they can typically rotate, they let you rotate the camera. They're not very elegant for this, but you can absolutely do it. So I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, as you can see, not super elegant necessarily. And then we can keep the film holder. I'm just going to slide it down here, make sure it's roughly 90 degrees. And now we can keep the film holder in the same orientation we had. Okay, yes, it gets slightly awkward because, can I exploit my flippy screen? No, it goes the wrong way. Okay, it gets slightly awkward because I have to sit over here and see the screen. But what's really nice now is that we can get the sensor closer to the film and use the long edge of the sensor for this side of the film. So I'm going to lower the camera, and we're going to have to do this in steps because we have to focus. This is an autofocus lens. I'm going to try and use it. Half the time it doesn't work. Okay, so we can see already we moved a bit closer, but it's not quite close enough, so I'm going to go a bit closer. When you're focusing like this, it's typically good to go into quite small steps because suddenly you've gone too far and it's just, you have to back up. This looks pretty good. I mean, I'm demonstrating this. I'm not going to be too careful. You would probably be a little bit more careful if you wanted to do a very nice scan. So our setup is we're going to leave it there. What's really important when you're doing this kind of stitching, because you get closer to the film, you get more resolution, its flaws become more obvious. So using a mirror to level your setup gets more important. I'm just focusing in on the aperture of the lens. So now the lens and camera can see itself, and I'm just going to move the middle of the screen, which you can see a little cross here, maybe here on the screen. I'm going to move that to the middle, and then I'm going to use the leveling feet on the VALOI holder on the VALOI light adapter to move in the other axes. Now the center of the screen, which is the center of the sensor on the camera, is aligned with itself, so it's pointing straight down. That's really important. If you don't have one of these mirrors, you can use whatever mirror. Some phone screens are even reflective enough, but I mean, we sell this for €5. Just get a mirror. They're really nice. So obviously now we're completely out of focus. I'm going to focus back. And at this point, you want to be careful. You've just leveled it and spent time and effort doing that. So be careful. Moving this around, you don't need to re-level. It's typically fine. So I'm just going to move this to the edge of the frame, and yeah, quite happy with that. Okay, so I've got my whole setup here. We're ready to scan, and I now have a remote. Really recommend the remote over a self-timer. So I'm going to take my first picture, and then we're going to move the film. And I'm aiming for the bottom of the screen now. So first I aligned it with the top, and now I'm aiming for the bottom. So I'm just waiting for the white of the edge to appear there. The exposure is the same. We're in manual mode. So next picture. Perfect. And now we just scan a few pictures. So I'm just pushing through here. Now I'm aiming for the top. So we're doing pairs. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And as you can see, it's rather quick. Okay, so we've imported the pictures from the camera that we did earlier into, just using this hub, onto my computer, and opened them in Lightroom. Standard import into Lightroom. And then we're here in the library module of Lightroom. That's where we're going to do most of the work until we get to converting them to positives, which in this case they're black and whites. So first I'll show you what I would do with a single picture and how it looks like, and then we'll go through and do it with more pictures in this batch process that I talked about earlier. So I'm going to select the two images and group them. So Command or Control G for group, and we can see that the group is selected. There's a little 2 here that looks like a stack of papers. and that shows that they are together now. So if we select that group and then click the photo in the top menu, and then go to photo merge and to panorama. You can also click Control M on Mac, and it's probably something similar on Windows. I forget exactly which control they use. I'm going to just use the menu, so photo merge, panorama. And this is only available in the library module. If you're in the develop module, it will look different and you can't use it. So be in the library module. When you're doing a single picture merge, you'll get this menu here. There's the spherical, cylindrical, and the perspective merge. They do different things, and you can see the Lightroom tries to give you a preview. Sometimes if you're working with really big files, it won't, but generally it will try and give you a preview. We're going to select the perspective. As you can see, the difference is pretty minimal, but technically this is a perspective merge, I think. They're a little opaque in exactly how they work, but there are different types of ways to take panoramas. Keep in mind that these tools are primarily made for photographers, for example, landscape photographers or artists taking wide actual panoramas of landscapes, whereas we're using it for a slightly different purpose. So we're going to choose a perspective. No boundary wrap warp. There's no need for any of that. Just make sure the auto settings is off. It will just apply unnecessary edits to your picture. We don't need those. We're going to do that later. And then click merge. What's important, what we've done here is right from the camera into Lightroom, we've not done any changes or anything to the pictures themselves. We've not converted them. We've just left them as negatives and applied this merge command on them. And as we can see, we've got a picture. This is what we have. I'm going to rotate it just so you can see a bit better. There we go. It's from Hamburg. The picture itself now is obviously a negative, but as we can see in the top left corner here, this is the resolution that we got. The resolution of the sensor itself natively is 8368 by 5584. Terribly messy. Whereas so this is just a single image, whereas the merged image is about 8300 by 8300. In terms of megapixels, that's so the single frame is about a 46 megapixel, I think, and the merged image, which is 8300 by 8300, roughly is a bit over 70 megapixels. So you can see we've gained quite a lot of image area, and that's because we didn't have to crop down. If you then consider the fact that usually we would have had to crop down to a square from this wider image, we would have gotten a 5500 by 5500 image file, which, let's see what that is. So 30 megapixels. So instead of those 30 megapixels, we've gone straight to a 70-something megapixel file. Quite nice. The picture itself now behaves just like any other picture from the camera. You can see Lightroom spits out the DNG, stands for digital negative. This is essentially a sort of raw format. From here we can obviously develop the pictures as usual. I would usually use Negative Lab Pro in my process. In this case, it's just a black and white image, so I'll just, for the sake of showing you what's going on here, I'm just dragging the curves upside down, so the left side up and the right side down, and that flips the image upside down. I'm also just going to add the black and white to it. And there you go, that's a really nice base for the picture to start editing it. I would probably pull up the highlights a little bit and pull down the shadows a little bit and maybe play with the brightness somewhat. But yeah, that's the final image. So now we've done one image, but what if you want to do more than one image? Let's go back here. I'm just going to quickly delete this for you so we can start from the start again. When we're doing more than one image, we will do the same thing. I've just ungrouped them so you can see this is what we started with, folder of pictures basically. And now I'll go through and group them. It's very easy because it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they have big numbers on them. So I wish Lightroom would do this automatically. Maybe it does. Lightroom is full of possibilities. I just go through and group them manually. So I select 1 and 2, click Command G in this case, Control if you're on Windows, and then go through them. Now it's 3 and 4 go together, and 4 and 5. Sometimes I get confused myself and I end up making duplicates. Maybe I forgot, so I end up taking 3 pictures of the same image. Just look at the images and make sure it's correct. And so with the 10 images, raw images from the camera that we started with, and we now have 5 images that are, well, 5 groups that will become 5 scans. After that, you just highlight all of them. You can hold Shift and go from highlight the bottom one and then the first one, or you can click Command A, or there are many ways of highlighting all of them. Still in the library module here, click Photo, same thing, Photo Merge, and still same thing, Panorama. You'll see now that instead of giving me this nice menu, Lightroom, for obscure reasons, decides that no, you don't need this menu. We'll do it for you. I think it tries to choose an automatic setting for doing this. You might get worse results doing a batch. On my pictures, scanning properly, getting very square, nice raw scans, which is important for this process. I've never really had problems with it. The main area where Lightroom, so you can see in the background here that it says up 4 operations in progress, and it's going through each picture and stitching them together. You can see it being spat out. In my process, I don't really have problems with it. The only real issues I've had is very kind of minimalist subjects where the algorithm doesn't get a lot to play with. We have a lot of winter here in Finland. Sometimes winter pictures are difficult. There's a lot of snow, there's a lot of sky, and there's like a branch. It might struggle with that. In those cases, stitching can be impossible with Lightroom. You might have to use other tools. Probably the most powerful one I've come across is called PT GUI, G-U-I, PTGUI, weird name. I guess it stands for, well, Panorama, but with a graphical user interface. Don't know. That one's really powerful. It is a bit over the top. It's a lot of settings and a lot of fancy tools that we don't need. I wish someone would make a panoramic stitching tool just for scanning, but maybe one day. But okay, so after these 5 images have processed, we see that, yeah, all the 5 images were successful. We see nice square images here, so we know which ones they are. You can filter for them if you want. In this case, it's just 5, so I'm just going to go and select them, and we'll flip through them and look at them. You can see that, yeah, looks good. I've just opened them in the develop module. I'm going to rotate it and then do the same monochrome, little adjustment, and yeah. And then I'll just go ahead and sync all of the pictures. So we have I've just synced all the settings across, so we get the same black and white conversion on all of them. It's not the most advanced way of doing black and white conversions, and as you can see, we lose a bit of shadow detail here and things, but it's not too bad for this preview. And as we said earlier, the resolution is now dramatically increased. Yeah, here we can see it's 8,400 in this case, about 8,000 by 8,000, which is really, really good considering the sensor is not even close to that. We can see that this was taken on a shaky SWC quite late at night, but it's a sharp image. The scan is sharp, at least. The film itself is not sharp. And we've got a lot of resolution and detail. I'm just going through and flipping them. The images look good. With this tool, you really can do a full roll. Like I said, the main limitation is the grouping, and then obviously you have to let your computer spin through all of the pictures. If you're not a Lightroom user, Capture One absolutely does exactly the same functionality. It looks different, but you'll be able to look up guides on how to do stitching. But yeah, I think that wraps up the stitching process for us. We've taken quite nice scans from the start. We've made sure all of the scan itself is of a higher quality, otherwise you'll get bad results out. This is a good way of ruining these results. You can get blurry bands across if your camera is slightly tilted or your film is not perfectly flat. You do see more errors the more resolution you try and pull out of your film. So do take some good care doing this physical stuff, and then the computer stuff is relatively easy. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about this process, you can absolutely leave a comment below on YouTube, or you can just send us an email. Our email address is hello@valoi.co. You can also reach out to us on Instagram if you feel like that. If you need any tips on alternative software, that's obviously something we can help you with, or we can also help you figure out which setup is for you if you don't already have a setup like this. But yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.